Hi, and welcome. I'm Lena, and tonight our guest is our own Ekpeki Oghenechovwe. Sorry, I'm gonna get it wrong. Oghenechovwe.
Oghenechovwe,
Thank
yeah,
you,
Donald.
Donald.
Yeah,
And he's a Normal Award winner and the editor of the new speculative fiction anthology, Dominion. So welcome and
yeah,
thank you for joining us.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Uh,
So it's great to be able to talk to you about this, and I hope we get a great talk. So Dominion is an unusual collection of science fiction, fantasy, horror, speculative stories told from an African and an African American perspective, spanning time and space. How did this project come about, and what were the criteria for which stories were selected?
okay. That's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to be brief. It was
Okay.
actually initiated by my co-editor, who goes by the pen name of the other night. She's actually a student of she studies public history in the University of Louisville. She's currently doing her PhD. She was doing her MA as at the time she initiated the project, and I was in law school at the time, so she hit me up and said she wanted to do an anthology. Yeah, so yeah, if I were to say a bit, because we talked about it extensively. So yeah, you were asking the what started, yeah, or what brought about the um the anthology. It was around the period of the 400-year anniversary of slavery, and it was inspired by that and the 1619 project, which she had just seen. So she wanted to do something to that would reflect or touch on our historical backgrounds and the relevant issues that were occurring, and yeah, the discussions that were ongoing at the time. So it also coincided with the submission of my short story. I sent a short story to her because she runs a magazine of alternate history and speculative fiction, selling quarterly, which paid 6 cents per word at the time, SFWA prorate. So I sent my story to her, and she really liked it, and would later tell me the everything else happening at the time, the events, the anniversary, the 1619 documentary, and my story would eventually be what would lead her to decide to do the anthology.
So
So
it's
yeah,
it's been a few years in the making.
yes, I would say yes, yeah, like a
Okay,
year,
great.
give or take. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that was great synergy between you.
yeah. Actually, it started as something else. Yeah, it was supposed to be, um, it was supposed to be about the anniversary actually, but along the way while we were planning, it eventually evolved into what we now have as Dominion. So yeah.
So cool. And so what were the challenges in creating an anthology? It's doubling an anthology like this.
Okay. Um, I don't know. The problems are so numerous, and I'm not even done with facing them yet. So it's a whole, yeah, it's another long story, but I'll try to be brief again. Well, the first thing was funding. That wasn't the first thing. There were a lot of things. First of all, the first issue was time. because she was a student. She was doing her MA at the time and looking to start a PhD. And I was currently in law school. I was reading for three pro magazines. I was dealing with, a lot of issues aside surviving as a Nigerian. This isn't the easiest. Um, and okay, there was the issue of manpower. It was just the two of us running the project, and she had a bunch of things on her hands. She was running two pro magazines, yeah, which paid pro rates, selling quarterly and Helios quarterly. She was running a small press, Aurelia Lee, while being in school and working part time. And I
Sure,
was,
that's a lot.
yeah, and I was in law school running a full time degree program, which was hectic to say the least. I was, yeah, I was a writer. I was handling my speculative fiction career. That was just before I won the Nomo Awards. So yeah, I was trying to put out my works and get people to take notice of it. I was also writing my novella because the short story Feyoku, which inspired the anthology, would eventually go into a novella. So yeah, I was writing the novella. I was writing a bunch of short stories. I was reading for three pro mags. I was trying to put out my work and get some attention for the No More Awards. So yeah, time. We're a bit pressed for time, but eventually we found a way to plan, call for submissions, and a bunch of stories flooded in. We had to read through just the two of us, and and we're working across time zones, which is another issue.
Yes.
So it means we had limited time to to we had limited time a week. By the time I was awake, half her day was gone. And
Mm.
by the time the time where both of us would be awake was limited. And within that limited time, we had a bunch of other things to do. So time was a huge problem. Then funding was another problem because, yeah, she's in school, she's running an expensive degree program. Myself, the same, and I wasn't exactly Batman's kid. So, yeah, funding was an issue, but we're determined to sort out the funding any which way, even if we had to do it with personal funds. We eventually did a Kickstarter, which was super successful, funded with over 300%. But
Oh, that's
even
great.
then, yeah, but even then, the Kickstarter was only for essentials and for the most essential things like printing, cover design, paying our writers, etc. It's not like we had a budget for tens of thousands of dollars to pay
Mm.
pop stars to promote the work. So yeah, we still had to do our promotion by ourselves again. We had to reach out to bloggers, booktubers, reviewers. Yeah, we have to reach out to, and these people are limitless. There are thousands of them. The work just couldn't get done because we're not enough. There were just the two of us,
Yes.
and yeah, so yeah, there was that too. Funding, manpower, time zones. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then there was also health issues. COVID
Mm.
19 broke out, and I have I'm disabled. I have a bunch of health issues. I'm definitely what's the word? What's the word for people that are extra vulnerable during this period? Yeah, I definitely have pre-existing conditions. I have several respiratory, yeah,
Oh,
issues,
okay.
and
So you had
yeah,
to
and yeah, there was
rest a lot as well.
anxiety. Yes, there was anxiety. There was dealing with health issues. Everything was compounded. My devices had to pack up in the middle of the pandemic, and I had to look for a way to fix them and replace them. I mean, that was literally risking my life for the anthology, but it had to be done because there was no way we could move forward. and herself had the same issues. Her devices had to pack up a few times. She had to
Mm.
order, there were delays. And yeah, she also had some health maladies because she suffered a house fire just before
Oh.
we started this project. So yeah, her mom had third degree burns. She herself
Oh.
suffered, yes, slightly less, but yeah. So yeah, there were health issues thrown in. There was, yeah, basically. And yeah, we're coming out under a small press, yeah, Aurelia Liu. So there were a number of venues that don't take reviews from small presses. So there's limits to what we can do, even when funding is not an issue or manpower is not an issue. So yeah, as far as problems go, that's the summary.
Yeah, but I'm glad you guys persisted because that's a lot of challenges besides the usual to a small press or an independent press. It's
Yeah,
the yeah, like you said, the health, which we don't often take into account when we're writing. Yeah. So,
yeah.
what made you want to join this project as an editor?
Okay. I wanted to join for several reasons, but two of them were the major ones. The first of those was, um, yeah, the fact that problems, there were several problems with literature on the continent, which I was hoping the anthology would be able to fix. The first of them is payment for writers. A lot of writers on the continent don't get paid because journals, magazines don't really pay. I mean, it's a global issue. Like
Yeah.
writing isn't exactly it's not a sport. People are the average writer isn't exactly getting tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars shelved out, per week to them. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, athletes do, but it's even worse on the continent. Like, it's only a handful of magazines or journals that pay. I could count them on the fingers of my hand, and that's one hand. So I was hoping the anthology solved that problem. Not solved it, but it took a stab at it. It will be a journal, a publication that would enable us to pay writers for their work. And
Yeah, set a precedent.
yes, exactly. And then there was also the issue of you know homegrown publications. There's always been this conversation going on about how we need our own things on the continent. You know, most of the time, speculative fiction writers on the continent and even literature generally have to go abroad to get published, big presses, big five,
Yeah.
everything, and we wanted to change that because going across the oceans literally to put out your art isn't exactly the most favorable. We have to go through editors, we have to go through readers, we have to go through magazines, journals, venues that don't exactly have the capacity to appreciate our work in
Especially
its
genre
full,
fiction.
yes, in its fullness. And that's a whole nother discussion. But we need, there's always been this talk of we need our own editors, we need our own spaces, we need our own things, to fully
Hmm.
thrive. So the magazine would be a chance for African speculative fiction writers to have their stories read, appreciated, and published by an African and a black editor that wouldn't discriminate on the basis of familiarity or unfamiliarity, rather.
And it also
So,
brings more of a voice to the continent as a
yeah,
speculative venue.
yes, exactly.
Okay. So, do you have any plans for the future anthologies?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Dominion Volume 2 of the anthology is already in the works. We're already
Okay.
planning it. Yeah, even before the launch of Volume 1. So, Yeah, we'll probably do a call for submissions sometime next year. So yeah, there's that, and I personally plan further anthologies, you know, for yeah to give to continue taking a stab at the structural and institutional problems of publishing for Africans, Black people, and people of color.
Okay, that's great. So, can you introduce us to some of the writers and collaborators in the Dominion anthology?
Okay, well, there is Dare Shegun Falowo, who is a Nigerian. He's been published on FNSF a couple times. There's Diomandila, there's Bugumadien, there's Nuzo Ono, all Africans. And there are also diasporans. There's Michael Boatman. Yeah, and our introduction is by Tanana Rive, which you probably know. Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of people from across the length and breadth of Africa and the diaspora. Yeah, men, women, speculative fiction writers with a lot of experience, and some that are just being published for the first time ever.
So
Like,
it's quite a
yeah,
wide range of writing experience that you're drawing on.
yeah.
Okay. So is there anything you learned from working as an editor with writers that you'd like to pass on, or any advice for other editors and for writers, sorry?
Okay. Well, there is definitely. I've read for 3 pro magazines. I've I've edited this anthology. I've done side editing for a bunch of other projects. So, and one thing I've learned is that you have to come to every project every story, sorry, as a clean slate. You have to come without any of your baggage, without any of your expectations. Because one thing I know is people have a lot of expectations. People put a lot of pressure on stories, and it ruins the experience. Your biases, your expectations tend to color a story. So as much as is possible, aside themes and other things that are absolutely necessary, you should come to a story without any of those things, ready to receive whatever exactly the story is throwing at you. People sometimes are unwilling to leave their comfort zones. They have certain things they want from stories, and certain things that they think are an indication of quality. Like, oh, this story should have suspense, it should have this bit of tragedy, oh, this magic system has to be like this. It doesn't have to be anyhow. It only has to be how the writer wants it to be. Some people, like I said, people are they don't like to leave their comfort zones. They want certain things like, oh, the witch in the story has to have a pointy hat on. She has to have a wand and a broomstick for flying and a bunch of spells that are a mixture of Latin and English and Spanish. And if that doesn't happen, then it's a bad story. But there's voodoo, there's all kinds of magic based on all kinds of different things. So when you have these expectations, you tend not to enjoy or appreciate a story the way that it's meant to be for what it is, not what you think it should be. So yeah, that's just my advice for mainly white editors. Yeah,
But
and
it
everybody.
also it also comes down to um, reader's preference as well, doesn't it?
Mm, well, I guess you could say that.
Yeah, but we'll get more to that a bit later down but for now, I just wanted to ask you, as a reader of Dominion, I was often surprised and disappointed that a few stories ended so abruptly, even seeming incomplete. So, do you think this is a holdover of an oral storytelling tradition? Or how do you feel about traditional oral, sorry, how do you feel traditional oral storytelling is evolving to meet the digital age? Because this
Well,
is something that I think would show the cultural difference between the Western and the African and the Indian and the Chinese and all the other non-Western storytelling forms.
okay. Well, we've always had. It's funny you asked me because I've been thinking about this separately for a while. We've always had an strong oral traditions with storytelling, with cataloging of our cultural experiences and history. It's always been an African thing. And yeah, it's something that you could say has dwindled with yeah time, technology, maybe not even time and technology, just what's it, colonialism and everything. So
So
yeah,
also
but
technology, because TV kind of took over storytelling.
yes, 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 that's true. Generally, I think that sometimes some storytelling lately, I've been discovering that stories are easier to consume, you know, in audio form. Maybe the oral traditions really had, maybe there was something to it. Like maybe it's not just something that should have been, left over or left behind. Like maybe there was, because I recently had reason to read a whole lot of stories in a very short amount of time. I was trying to do a review, like slash catalog of all the African speculative fiction stories by Africans that were published last year. So there were a lot of them. There were hundreds, and I had to read a lot of them in a short time. And I decided to try audio because um, I could consume audio while being involved in other things. It saved me time and it was easier. It took less concentration. And I found it to be a very easy and efficient and moving way of consuming stories. The stories felt real. There was this impact it had hearing when it's delivered right. But it's unfortunate because not all venues have stories in that form, and not all stories can be gotten in that form. So yeah, um, audio stories are not still the go-to or the default form for stories. It's still text. So yeah, but in so far as I was able to get audio, I think I kind of preferred it. And a friend of mine who has always consumed audio has told me that the stories which I haven't managed to get to, difficult books, that it would be easier for me to consume if they were audio. So yeah, I believe that our those oral traditions are very valid and would be a very efficient means of yeah consuming and enjoying stories.
But do you feel that there's the way a lot of the stories that seem incomplete to a
Okay.
reader that's sort of used to certain kind of three act plays or a definite beginning and a definite ending. Do you think
Yeah.
that those stories that don't follow that tradition are following oral storytelling traditions?
Well, I haven't really thought about it like that, but yeah, I guess I I haven't really thought about that. Well, here's what I want to say is
Mm-hmm.
the stories in the Dominion anthology would definitely all be improved by audio, by being made into audio form, and that's currently in the works. We're currently getting narrators, and we're going to make an audio book of all the stories in the Dominion anthology, which is going to be released later on during the year. So I guess
Okay.
we'll find out if audio really is a better form of delivery for some of them.
Yeah, that's great. So, do you think some of the stories, especially those that seem more suited to an oral tradition, might benefit from being presented more as a podcast than a written story? And could you see yourself working on a project like that besides Dominion?
Yes, like I said, I've been thinking about this already, and I'm definitely open to the idea. I might even have something. Um, I might already have something in my head, regarding that I'm thinking of. So yeah, I'm definitely open to it.
Well, that's excellent. So, on that note, I was blown away by Convergence in Chorus Architecture by Darius, is it Sigan
Shegun,
Noah? It's an almost
Shegun
epic
follower.
story, much like your own. So, what were your first feelings on reading that story?
Okay, okay. Uh, my first feelings on reading the story, the the first the first sentence I read in the story blew me out. Like I had to come out. I stopped reading after the first sentence, and yeah, I had to come out and tweet at the world like, hey, I just read something. I even posted the first sentence of the story, like this was a killer opening. So yeah,
Yeah,
it definitely made an impact. Yeah, I still remember the opening. It was in the fires of war, Super was born. It's the kind of opening that lets you know things are about to happen or it's about to go down. So yeah, it it definitely left an impact. So yeah, yeah I yeah I liked it a lot. To just put it that way. Yeah, I
yeah.
liked it a lot.
I'll just let you know it's my favorite in the anthology.
Oh really? Mm.
But
Yeah.
anyway, let's go on to your story. So I'm gonna mispronounce it, I suppose. Is Ife Iyoku,
Ife Yoku, yeah.
the tale of Imari Yunugu or Gabon?
Imade Yunuagbo.
Okay, sorry. So it's very different from Witching Hour, and it's been a while in the crafting, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah, actually, I wrote the short story which I sent to Celine Quarterly, which inspired the anthology. The short story was published last year, about a year ago. Then, of course, I wrote it way before it was published. So let's say like months before that, maybe the previous year before last year. So I wrote the short story. I got it published, but the idea was still simmering. It wasn't ready to end just yet. So it expanded into a novella while I was in law school, and yeah, which turned into the novella we have today. And it's gone through a number of rewrites till it got to its final iteration. So yeah, it's based on Yoruba law and yeah, tradition, religion, creation story. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it has a lot of similarities to Dare's story. Yeah, but I would say it's more it's more, yeah, it's more plot driven. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I especially like that it's a very different look at a dystopian future.
Yeah. 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 You said it's different from yeah, the witching hour. Well, maybe from where I'm standing though, I wouldn't say it is because essentially the two stories are doing the same thing. They feature women who don't accept the way things are in where they are, and they try to break free and forge their own path in spite of all the obstacles. So yeah, I would say they have their similarities. Uh,
But your approach of exploring that is very different in those two stories.
yes, yes, I guess.
Um, so, are you going to be taking your story and the world that you've built further? And do you know if the authors of the anthology plan to do the same with their stories?
Well, yeah, I would say yes, because one of the purposes of the anthology was to discover African voices and black voices, and some of them were already, you know, fairly established writers, so they would definitely already have a career and will be taking them further. And some of them will be doing so with the very stories they submitted to us. I already know some of the writers are going to go on to publish their stories after Dominion Anthology, expand on their worlds and build it into books. And yeah, even some of the newer writers are going to be exploring their stories in other forms, like Clanfold, for example. I know there's a plan for it to go in to be made into a comic or a graphic novel. A plan which I
Oh,
might
that's
be involved
exciting.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, because the world is very expansive. Which yeah, and yeah, my story. Yeah, I have the world. The idea is expansive. It wasn't well explored as a short story, and it's still not well explored as a novella. So I'm thinking maybe a trilogy or even a series of up to 5 books. Yeah, set in the same world, featuring the same some of the same characters, but spanning different times. So yeah, I definitely have plans for the world and the story. In fact, I think that should be my next project once I'm able to find some time in between putting out the Dominion anthology and surviving.
Yeah. But it's exciting news to know that we're going to see more of these worlds and in different formats. So I know it's unfair to ask you which stories are your favorites in the anthology. So can you tell us which trends in the anthology excited you the most?
Well, it's actually not unfair to ask me which stories were my favorite because yeah, when you ask which, you're not exactly asking me which are better,
No,
which is
no, I'm
a
asking
very
you
which is a
what are
so
the trends?
yeah 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 asking me which are better is a very subjective question, which is really is impossible. Yeah,
Mm.
because we'd have to go into. But what you're asking me is which, or what you're not asking me is which are my favorite. Which
Yeah,
really
I'm not.
it's yeah,
I'm
you're
not
not
asking
asking
your
me. I know,
favorite.
but it's a fair
Um.
question, and I would like to answer it.
Okay.
Yeah. My favorite is my personal preference. Which is
Mhm.
just as a disclaimer, which is very different from anything else. So yeah, which I also have a right to. Yeah, because yeah, which brings me to something else. Your initial question about if I had anything to say based on my experience and my time as an editor, I want to add this to it is that as an editor or a reader, you can't pick the stories you like. You can't only publish the stories you like, even as a publisher, because everybody has a preference, has a taste, has a style, what they want in a story, which I mentioned you have to leave behind. But leaving them behind doesn't remove them from you. It's part of you. It's who you are. For some reason, based on a bunch of things that you picked up, you form all these preferences, and it's fine. It's valid. It's not going to change. So separate from your selection of stories, you still have that preference of what you like. Although you're not going to only publish what you like, because there will be stories that are relevant, there will be stories that are good, there will be stories that need to be heard, separate from or despite your preferences. So you're going to leave your preferences behind and publish what you need and pick what is good. But yeah, you still have those preferences at the end of the day, and I'm free to state mine. So yeah, talking about stories which might not be your preference but which are valid. In the anthology, one of those stories was The Unclean by Nozo Ono.
Yeah,
I
that's a
would
powerful
really,
story.
yo, yes, exactly. That's a powerful story. I really can't say I like the story. I
Mm.
mean, I only read it once when I had to, but see, it's undeniably powerful and beautifully written, and it definitely needs to be seen by the world. You see that story is another another teaching moment. Um, and the story is a reprint, and I think it was self-published. And I'm angry at the world that it didn't get a bigger platform to stand on. That it had to come out on a platform that did not allow it to be seen or to be maximized, and that it wasn't published soon. I think that that is a failure of publishing and the
Yeah,
literary
but
industry. And I can definitely see why such a story would not be put out. It's not pleasant. It's not, yes, it's dark, it's gritty, it's
yeah,
terrible. But, you know, there has to be a place for those kind of stories because they tell and teach a very powerful thing that the world needs to know and hear about women, and it's a very authentic and original story. I know because I'm in Nigeria and I live and I see some of those things, you know,
yeah.
around
We
me.
get that in South Africa as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but an editor is going to look at that and say, "Ew, this
yeah,
can't fly." You know, it's ew. And you see, that's the problem. And
yeah,
yeah, but yeah, hopefully, yeah, which is why we have to keep publishing for stories like this because it doesn't look like anyone else will.
yeah,
Another story, you know, that I'll talk about is Dare's story. Dare's story again is is a great story, you know, and Dare is a great writer. I've known him for a while, even before the Dominion anthology. I've read and edited some of his works before this, so and I still wouldn't say it's my favorite story though, because Dare's story have a they have a complexity to them. You know, there's a way he writes. He doesn't reach out to you with words. He reaches out to you with feelings and emotions.
and
When you
images.
when yes, and images. When you come out of a direct story, you really can't say what you read. You really can't say what you can say is how it made you feel. You know,
Mm.
you know, and I'm a plot guy. I'm a plot guy. I I I I grew up on certain kind
I
of
get you.
stories.
I'm also a plot girl.
Yeah, so
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I'd like to see the princess whose father is evil and she has to be rescued, and you know, that's just my personal. So on that note, my favorite story in the anthology is um what's the name? Clownfall, Death of Kings. Yeah, I that was one of the stories that I'm sure the incomplete ones we were talking about.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
definitely feels like it was an episode, and it reminded me a
yes,
lot of
yes.
Black Panther.
Black Panther, Star Wars, Ben
Mm.
10. Yeah, Clownfall is space opera, which is pretty rare for African speculative fiction. I haven't read a lot of space opera that is. Yeah, this one is set in futuristic Kenya, and it features um a lot of guns and evil, insane killing robots and
A lot of
tricksters
action.
and princesses needing rescuing, and it's
Yeah,
very, yeah, it's not just cliche. It's original in its own way while incorporating most of those tropes, space opera tropes that we grew up on. It has Kenyan culture as its base, as it has Kenyan culture very, very deeply entrenched in it. It's original, and it's just a world I'd like to see more. It's complex. It's
yeah.
politics. So it's not just it's Black Panther, it's Star Wars, it's Ben 10, it's Game of Thrones. It's yeah, it's my favorite story in the anthology. And if
So
I
that's
were to pick, yeah, another one, it would be the Michael Boatman story. Yeah. Um
the
yeah.
treasure of men.
Yes, the treasure of men. That story, that's another story that was like Nuzo Ono story. But I rather liked this one because this one wasn't just about this was the sort of the opposite. This was about the victims getting back. It's a powerful revenge story. And just like it's another of those stories that emphasizes why we need to create platforms where we can publish our stories. It it's a story that wasn't we've been getting a bunch of reviews, and it's been one of the stories that has been getting the least love from reviewers because you know they tend to see it as or describe it as a tasteless revenge story. But you see, that story really is a powerful story about victims getting justice. You know, being it's about very necessary retribution for wrongs, and I can see why a lot of people don't like the idea. But it's a very valid thing, you know. And once again, these are some of the stories that will be swept under the carpet if we don't take charge of them and ensure that we put out these stories. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Um.
one of the things, sorry, let me just say this. One of the
Yes.
things that I really am grateful for the Dominion anthology for is that it created a space that allowed all these stories to thrive collectively. They get to be appreciated more because they are not standing in the middle of um a bunch of other things that are different. So it doesn't have to look strange. It's standing among its own, which is why you get to appreciate Dare's story. Dare's story is one of the most loved stories so far, um, based on feedback I've been getting. But you see, it's not his first story. He's published a lot of stories in a lot of magazines, The Dark, FNSF, etc. And none of them have quite gotten this kind of appreciation because they tend to seem it tends to seem strange and foreign and stand out as an odd thing. Sometimes we hear yeah, and yeah, so it's we need a space. We need a space where we don't feel strange, where we don't feel like
Where you can fit
since
in.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
So we just got just a couple of minutes left. Two quick
okay.
questions. Okay. So what are some of the things that might help further development of African science fiction and fantasy literature, both within the continent and the connection with the rest of the science fiction fantasy world? Can you just give me like 2 points?
Okay. Well, there is I would say more of this what we've done now.
Mm-hmm.
More African editors, more publications, anthologies, magazines, more creating a safe space where our writers can thrive, be paid, have their voice appreciated for its uniqueness. Yeah, yeah. So basically, yeah, more of this, like I said, and more of what is going on now. With fire. Fire is they have FireCon coming on a convention. There's the Ignite Awards. There's the African Speculative Fiction Society. There's No More Awards, which I won. So we need to build more platforms, more institutions, and the work isn't just on us because no matter how much we do, yeah, the rest of the world has to be ready to be carried along. People have to come out of their comfort zones and see what's going on around them. So yeah.
Okay. So that would be readers and writers both, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
editors and everybody.
So what are you hoping readers of this anthology will take away from it? Just very quickly.
Okay. Well, I would like them to understand that, yeah, there is more than. Because one thing I've also been getting from the anthology is I get the word unusual a lot. It's, oh wow, this anthology is so unusual. It's so new. It's so wow. This kind of writing, it says a lot. I get what they mean. The stories are unusual. Our magic systems, our laws, but it should go without saying. I mean, stories that are based on one culture should be different from stories based on any other culture, like, yeah, the European, or, yeah, the American one. And you shouldn't be so surprised that it's different. You would only be surprised if you weren't expecting it to be different. If you were expecting one thing to be the only thing that there is, or be the only way that things can be. So there's difference out there. There's diversity. And while, yeah, the stories are different, that's the fact, and I appreciate that. And but it's not exactly flattering or a good thing when the reaction just shows how bad things are. You know how the surprise, the wonder at that difference just shows how much one thing has become the norm. So I would like people to reach out more. I would like readers to realize that there is more out there, and they should look beyond the borders of what they know or what they are used to, and stop looking to be spoon fed. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, to not spoon feed readers. So, Dominion, is it out this month?
Yes, on the 17th.
Okay, and where can we buy it?
Okay. You can get it on the website Aurelia Liu. I can send you a link. But when you get to the website, it links to practically every existing platform: Amazon, iBooks, Kobo. Yeah, it's on every outlet and every platform you can think of. Yeah. So
Okay, that's great.
yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you, Ekpeki. Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah,
I'm never sure.
Ekpeki. Yeah,
Okay, thank
Ekpeki
you.
Oghenechovwe Donald.
Thank you. So, thank you for chatting to us, and we hope to hear from you and read much more from you and the writers of Dominion in the future.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Uh,
Thanks for your time. Yeah.
no, thank you as well. It's been a very interesting talk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Same here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.